Hello and welcome to the HR Kyle podcast, the ultimate resource for HR insights and guidance that will empower both seasoned business professionals and eager job seekers. I'm HR Kyle, your host. I'm excited to embark on this journey with you. In each episode, we'll delve into the intricacies of HR management, uncovering strategies that can transform the way you approach talent acquisition, employee engagement, and workplace dynamics. Whether you're a seasoned HR pro navigating the ever-evolving landscape of human resources or a job seeker striving to land your dream position, this podcast is your compass. Our mission is simple: to provide you with actionable knowledge, expert interviews, and inspiring stories that will help you thrive in the world of HR. So, sit back, relax, and get ready to take your HR game to the next level. Welcome to the HR Kyle podcast, where HR meets success. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another episode of the HR Kyle podcast. I'm your host, HR Kyle. In our first segment today, we'll dive into part 2 of Managing Unsatisfactory Performance. And if you tuned in last time, you'll remember that we talked about everything to get you set up to be sure that that meeting with the employee is effective. Well, guess what? Today we're going to talk about the employee meeting. Later in segment 2, we have the return of Brian. Brian joined us a few weeks back and talked about his career journey, and Brian was the esteemed college professor. Well, this time around, he'll be sharing invaluable advice for students transitioning to the work world and those contemplating a return to college for a career change. But stick around, we need to take a quick break first, and then we'll be right back with more on the HR Kyle podcast. Are you a business owner looking to build a thriving team? Or perhaps a job seeker on a quest for your dream career? Look no further than HR Kyle. HR Kyle is your trusted partner for all things human resources. We're not just about services, we're about success. For businesses, HR Kyle offers tailored HR solutions from talent acquisition to compliance support. We're here to help your team flourish. And for the job seekers, HR Kyle provides personalized career guidance and direction that only a seasoned HR professional can offer. We'll help you find that perfect job match. Don't settle for less. Choose HR Kyle and unlock success today. Visit us at www.hrkyle.com. HR Kyle, unlocking potential, empowering careers, transforming business. Welcome back, wonderful listeners. This is the HR Kyle podcast. In segment 1, we're diving into the continuation of our exploration on managing unsatisfactory performance. Today, we'll be talking about the meeting that you have with employees. I'm going to give you some insights and some strategies to help you manage what can often be a very challenging aspect of managing employee performance. So let's dive into that. Again, last time we made sure that the employee was well aware of the expectations in advance of any meeting to talk about performance deficiencies. Once you've secured that, we're going to get ready for the meeting next. And I always recommend approaching these meetings with a few assumptions in place. Here's number 1. The employee did not know the expectation was in place. Again, I realize we said, hey, make sure that they do and so on, but stick with me on this one. Going into it with this attitude allows you to feel much more empathetic to their situation, because remember, we want to avoid emotion here. We want to focus more on the facts. So by assuming the person wasn't clear on the expectations, you're taking some of the emotional impact out of there, and you're able to exhibit more empathy towards that person. Okay, number 2, it's your fault, meaning you as supervisor, that they didn't know the expectation. Again, they should have known. You may well have presented it to them. But let's put the blame on you to start out with. Again, that's going to make you much more emotionally less charged into this situation. Assumption number 3, this person wants to keep their job and I'm helping them accomplish that. Please have that attitude going into this meeting. Number 4, I owe it to this person and the rest of the team to address this because you want your team to be successful. So you're not going to let this performance slide, these performance issues. You're not going to just push those underneath the table. You're going to address them. So you're going in there with that attitude. The other details to think about as you approach this meeting are: one, point to very recent examples of where performance expectation was and wasn't met. Remember, you're confirming, which tells them here's where their performance is meeting or exceeding expectations, and you're providing them corrective feedback. And this is where their performance isn't meeting expectations. Okay, make sure you've got a combination of both. Number two, tell them why this expectation is important. And please don't say because I said so or because I'm the boss. Give them legitimate reasons that point back to the goals and objectives of your department and therefore the company. Also, allow for dialogue and questions. This isn't a lecturing session. It's a conversation. It's a discussion to guide them to the performance level that you're looking for. And here's another key point. We'll talk about this more in detail as we get into this discussion further. Follow up with a quick email summarizing your expectations. Again, here, two goals in mind. One, you want to encourage retention of the information that was shared in the meeting. And number two, you really want documentation. So someone later on can't say, well, you didn't tell me about this. You didn't tell me what was expected of me. You didn't address the performance issue. Let's fast forward now to the meeting. Preparing to meet. One, as supervisor, let your HR team know, or your HR representative know, that you're going to be meeting with this employee about performance issues and give them some idea of what the performance issues are. Have the job description handy and ready for review in the meeting. Be sure that you've got the most current edition, and you should be able to get that from your HR team. Number three, assume the employee innocently forgot the performance expectations. It's less threatening for them and for you. It lessens your emotions, as I mentioned earlier, and it takes the focus away from the person and towards the behavior. Again, that's where we're focusing. We want behavioral change. Remember your goal too, and that's to improve performance. It's not to berate the employee. It's not to tear them down. It's not to make them feel bad. It's not to have them be the brunt of your emotions and your anger. No, your goal is to improve performance. And I can assure you, getting angry, losing your patience, all of those things, that's not going to accomplish your goal. Trust me on that one. Be prepared to provide examples of expectations met and unmet. Remember, I said that a moment ago. You're providing both confirming, meaning they've met or exceeded your expectations, and correcting, meaning they have not met your expectations. You need to have both. Both let the employee know what your expectations are. One says, you're doing this right, keep doing it. The other says, you're not doing this like I need you to. Here's how you do it. Schedule somewhere that's private. And please, if you can do this, meet face to face. Also, send the meeting notice as close to the meeting time as reasonable. Doesn't fit that typical measure that I talk about, 24 hours. That may be okay. Here's why I say that. You get a meeting notice out of the blue, or what seems like out of the blue from your boss. You're naturally assuming that it's something negative. And then you're ruminating on that. So that's what that employee is going to be doing. And again, we want to try to remove as much emotion from this meeting as possible. But that leads into my final point. Expect the employee to be emotional. And don't necessarily see that emotion that they express as a bad thing. Part of what they may be expressing emotion about is a fear of losing their job, which means their job is important to them. So you can use those emotions in your favor, because if they're upset and they're crying or whatever the reaction is, that demonstrates to you that they want to keep their job. And thus, if they want to keep their job, they're going to do the things that you're asking them to do to improve their performance. Okay, so let's talk about the meeting now. One, get to the point. Don't drag it out. The person's already nervous walking in. Keep the small talk to a minimum. I can assure you, it's you cracking a joke or anything else is not going to make it any better. The person's nervous. They're wondering whether they're meeting with you. So get to the point. Here's an example. John, I wanted to sit down and talk about the new customer report you prepared for me. There were quite a few errors in your facts and figures that I ended up having to correct. There was the same issue with correct facts and figures in the potential customers report as well. You and I talked about it a month ago, about how important accuracy was in these reports. Help me understand what is keeping you from providing the correct information. And then you know what you do? You listen. You actively listen. Listen to understand, not to talk more. Listen for themes and root cause. Take notes about the key points that they're sharing. Keep your posture open. Be sure that you're nodding, you're providing eye contact, and you're watching and providing verbal cues. So you're being an active listener. Those are all active listening techniques. You're summarizing what you heard the person say. That lets them know that you're listening. That confirms that you heard them. It also confirms that you're hearing the correct information, because whatever you reflect back that's incorrect, they should correct you on that. And finally, be a curious observer and participant. Notice how I started off the question. Help me understand. I legitimately want to understand what happened. I'm being curious. Again, it makes it much less threatening. So here's some other things to think about in this meeting. Keep the meeting on track. Remember, it's about your performance on the issue. That's where your focus is. If it starts to get off into other areas, bring them back to the goal of the meeting. Remind the employee of the goal of the meeting. That's okay. You can do that a couple of times. What is it? To improve performance. Why? That reduces defensiveness, because it's not about emotions. It's about this performance deficiency that's taking place. Also, address legitimate concerns, issues, and challenges. So here's some legitimate concerns. Roadblocks that are rooted in the company, department, or you that's keeping that person from meeting that performance expectation. So listen to those. Also, things that are getting in the way of the employee meeting the performance expectation, whatever that may be. Also, you address how those will be resolved or what needs to be done. So they've shared a legitimate concern, and you're going to address how those will be resolved and what needs to be done. You're going to do that in the meeting. And then finally, with the concerns that they share, if they reference another employee, get to the root cause of referencing the other employee. How is that other person affecting their ability to perform their job at expectations or above? So again, get to the facts. The other key point with the meeting is the employee should take ownership of their improvement and correction. You're asking them, what can you do? Meaning you as supervisor. How can I help you? If they give you the silent treatment, maybe that means they're just not sure what to do. So again, you're going to guide them through that process. At the end of the day, they need to own whatever this performance improvement process is. So let's talk about closing the meeting. One, you're going to review the performance expectations. I want you to acknowledge the important points that they shared, reiterate what they agreed to. So whatever they said they were going to do to improve their performance, please state that back to them. And then discuss any follow-up items. So here's what that might sound like. Okay, so just to review, we talked about how critically important it is that you're using the correct facts and figures for both the new customer report and the potential customer report. John, you admitted that you needed to be provided the data sooner by Dave, so you'll follow up with Dave to let him know when you need the data each month. And you will double check both reports for accuracy before you submit them to me. Sound good? Again, that's your closing in the meeting. After the meeting, a couple of things. One, monitor their performance. This should begin immediately after the meeting. You've shared with them what needs to happen. You've talked through a plan to address that, so you should be seeing improvement immediately. Monitor the plan to improve performance. So in the previous example, this person was going to talk with Dave and make sure that Dave was getting them the data sooner and so on. Is that happening? The things that they committed to. Provide confirming feedback and corrective feedback. I know I keep saying that because I find so many managers and supervisors lose sight of that. You got to give both. That also should begin immediately after the meeting. Now, you may need to, keep this in mind, formally meet again. There might need to be some tweaks, additions, subtractions required to the plan. The plan may just not be working, or the root causes are not correct. We thought the root cause to this performance deficiency was one reason or these two reasons, but it turns out as things have played out further and you kept a closer eye on it, it looks like it's something else that's causing the issues. Be prepared to, supervisor, to escalate corrective feedback. Know what your tolerance level is. And as I stated at the beginning of this, be sure you have HR plugged into this process throughout so they can provide you the support that you need. But again, determine what your tolerance level is. If in the example prior where John's preparing the reports and he's giving inaccurate data, how often are you going to have that report get submitted, be incorrect, and be not timely before you're going to say, well, we need to wrap this up and this person needs to exit. They clearly can't meet my expectations. So know that tolerance level going into this conversation. One other piece of advice I want to give you, and we'll talk about this more in a later episode, but to wrap this topic up for today, what often happens in these situations where we have unsatisfactory performance is we tend to lose sight of our high performers because we don't have as much time to spend with them. Don't do that. Here's what happens with high performance. They're not told they're high performers and they're appreciated. They don't know they're high performers. They don't get recognized for their efforts. Again, you're spending so much time on your underperformers that the high performers don't get attention. Obviously, they don't get as much of your time. They're not developed further. They don't have the opportunity to help low performers. That's the other thing you can use your high performers for. And then finally, when your low performers are underperforming, guess who typically picks up the slack? Your high performers. So in essence, they're being punished for someone else's lack of performance. Don't let that happen. Well, that wraps up our insightful journey through managing unsatisfactory performance in segment 1. Let's take a little breather and know that we'll be right back with more engaging content on the HR Kyle podcast after this short break. Don't go anywhere because we've got our guest Brian teed up and ready to go.
Are you a business owner looking to build a thriving team? Or perhaps a job seeker on a quest for your dream career? Look no further than HR Kyle. HR Kyle is your trusted partner for all things human resources. We're not just about services, we're about success. For businesses, HR Kyle offers tailored HR solutions from talent acquisition to compliance support. We're here to help your team flourish. And for the job seekers, HR Kyle provides personalized career guidance and direction that only a seasoned HR professional can offer. We'll help you find that perfect job match. Don't settle for less. Choose HR Kyle and unlock success today. Visit us at www.hrkyle.com. HR Kyle, unlocking potential, empowering careers, transforming business.
Welcome back, HR Kyle podcast listeners. This is what I always say is my favorite part of the show, and today's no different. Segment 2. And in this segment today, we have a fantastic guest joining us today. And how do we know he's fantastic? Well, he was on here a few weeks back and spent some time with us. Brian has come back today. If you remember, Brian is a professor at Ohio State University. And I asked him to come back and talk about something a little bit different this time. And that is the topic of transitions. So you're going to notice the questions that we get into today really deal with making career transitions or transitioning from college to workplace. Brian, welcome back to the HR Kyle podcast.
Kyle, it's great to be back, and I really enjoy your podcast. So, again, I want to thank you for having me back on.
No, Brian, we're glad to have you. We've been looking forward to this conversation today. I know a lot of my listeners have asked me questions about making the transition, so I know you can shine some light on that for them.
Yeah, a transition is not always easy, but a change is something that we have to expect in this life. And as I've gotten older and more mature, life is ever changing, and you've got to be able to change with the times. For me, as a professor at The Ohio State University, I found that the way I taught 20, 25 years ago won't work today. You've got to be able to reach your audience, and you've got to have, for me, it's got to be centered around the student and around what they believe in and the best ways that they communicate. So for me, I learn a lot by observing the world around me and also how my students react and how they learn. Many students and many people in general, they learn by what they see or hear, one or the other, but usually it's a combination of things. So we've got to learn to adapt, to change with the times, and to make it student centered, people centered, whatever it might be.
Brian, that's some wonderful advice to kick off this session. We have a phrase that I use in my work called meeting the person where they are, and that sounds like what you're describing there.
Yes, absolutely does. When I first started in this profession, and that was back 37, 38 years ago, the student wasn't really the center of the circle. Uh, the professors were hard nosed. They weren't really kind to the students, and I think that was one thing that led to really a major nursing shortage. There's a phrase in nursing that nurses eat their young. Often supervisors, charge nurses, nurses in general are very tough on new grads and young nurses who just graduated, and that just doesn't fly anymore. We have to be committed to the learning of our students, and really nothing is louder than overthinking things. We've got to learn to be kind. Kindness never fails. And that's one thing I've tried to be as I've gotten older and more mature. Kindness is the way to go. And really, kindness makes you beautiful.
Right, that's some profound wisdom, and it really leads really well into my first question for you tonight. And one thing I talk with young professionals about is making that transition from classroom to the workplace. And I really see a lot of people struggle with this. In your work, you're guiding and instructing students every day, as we've talked about. What are qualities that you see in the classroom that you find make the transition to the work world easier?
That's a great question, Kyle. And really, everything you can imagine can happen. So, when you go to a classroom, for example, you're going to work. You don't get paid for it, but what you get is you get a paycheck in education and street smarts. The one thing I've learned, especially for nursing students or students of any type of profession, is never quit, because those feelings that come back are feelings that never left to begin with. So when you get tired and when you feel overwhelmed by your day, just take a little break, reboot, and someday I always tell my students that one day you'll laugh at how much you let things bother you in the present. Have your focus and have a focus on, I'm not there yet, but I'm going to get there, and I'm going to make life the best that I can make it.
If I can take anything away from that, I would take a couple of things. One, have a laser focus on your goals. Secondly, realize that you're going to have some ups and downs. And I
Mhm.
heard three in there, maintain your your health. Focus on maintaining your wellness and taking care of yourself through this. And then probably if there's a fourth one here, have a little bit of a sense of humor.
Absolutely right. I couldn't agree with you more. Really, young people in general, they have to learn how to control their minds. And really, and that's true for all of us, but it starts when we're young, that if we can control our mind, our self control, and control our emotions, we can do anything that we put our mind to. But it starts with our mind. And really, we all have to be honest. We have to be true and be real to ourselves, and don't be intimidated by what you see. If you see other people maybe not working as hard as you are, but maybe not talk as much, everything doesn't need a reaction. Look around and just observe things. It gets back to being true to yourself. That old phrase, honesty is the best policy, still rings true, especially in today's world where we know we have a lot of fake news, a world of phoniness and false prophets. Be true to yourself, but keep that focus.
We often talk about professionals making career transitions, and you and I've talked about the struggle that that can be. But for those students who come back to college, so they've worked for a little bit and then they've decided they want to pursue a college degree, what are some things they struggle with, and what are some things that you find that they strive with?
Well, some of the struggles really start with the doubt in your mind, that self doubt. And one thing I have found, Kyle, is that people speak to themselves, that inner dialogue, with a very negative communication. That self talk is very, very negative. They have actually done studies that I have researched quite a bit because I also do podcasts. And they have found that negative self talk is much more damaging than people who speak positive to themselves. Now, I want to say that again, if you don't mind. Negative self talk is more damaging than people who have a positive outlook. So, we really have to train our mind to be stronger than our emotions. However, we have to do that. For a lot of people, it's really just showing integrity, standing up for your rights, giving gifts every day. I have found that every day I tell myself, I want to give a gift back to someone today. Now, whether that's letting someone out in heavy traffic or giving a compliment or a smile or just showing some caring, give back to your society, follow the good, because people who are positive and say, I'm going to do good today, they have healthier lives, they're happier, and it just seems like the universe is with them and that positive energy follows them wherever they may go.
Brian, as we've had this conversation, one thing that stood out to me, and you and I share in this belief, one, whether you think you can or you think you can't, you're probably right, and I know you and I share in that. But the other thing that's striking in what you've shared is the fact that at no point did you say, okay, you need to study this much or you need to do this. A lot of what you speak of that you see success in other people is simply the mindset that they take in approaching their life's challenges.
That is 100% is your mindset. Now, I do think that it's very important to have a grateful heart. A grateful heart and a grateful mind is best achieved by just being aware of your surroundings and your world and having a appreciation really for what you have in life, and also looking at life where you look at the good in life. In other words, really being mindful of the blessings that you have. I feel like all good gifts come from above, but I want to be mindful of that. I want to be grateful. That mindfulness is really what I talk to young people about, and not only my nursing students, but a lot of people I come in contact with. Now, mindfulness really isn't a mind that is full, especially negative thoughts and cares of the day, but it's being mindful of what good things that you have in your world and in life. Mindfulness is really a way of thinking, which is basically what you just said, in which you focus on being intensely aware of what you're sensing and feeling in that moment. It should be without judgment or worry. To me, it's about being aware of my surroundings, appreciating the goodness, the positivity that I am seeing and hearing and feeling. So, if I can encourage all your listeners out there, have a mindfulness that starts by clearing your mind of all the negatives and all the cares of the world and all the worries and frustrations and even the bad memories that haunt you and worry you. I practice mindfulness every day, and that involves some breathing. I call it inhale courage, exhale fear, and it's a focused relaxation. So I'm going to encourage all of your listeners and also my students, if they're listening, to have that mindfulness, Think of something peaceful, a peaceful memory, a peaceful place in your life, and a mind that reduces stress and produces positivity.
Brian, that's a very grounded response. And I do hope our listeners are taking all that to heart because, again, what I heard you say was in order to achieve the things that you're looking to achieve, in order to have that laser focus, you've got to have your mind clear and it's got to have positive thoughts. Negative thoughts tend to weigh you down, they tend to distract you, and they take your focus off what your goals are.
Absolutely 100%.
Brian, I want to wrap up today's segment with this question, and I'm really looking forward to hearing your perspective on this because I think in your role, you have a unique perspective. And that is, you've been a non traditional student and now you're a professor. With that unique perspective, what advice would you provide to someone either returning to college after a break or starting college later in life?
Again, that's a great question. And I am not traditional by any sense of the word. I received a master's degree at 60, a doctorate at 62. So I didn't follow the traditional route. But one thing I found that I couldn't have that mindset of being a quitter. Things don't get easier if you quit. And they don't get easier anyway for most people because they have to realize that you've been called and you have a higher calling. Why else would the universe put it on your mind if it wasn't meant to be? So, again, I'd like to encourage your listeners and my students, if they're listening, to not quit. In particular, keep trying. Don't make excuses. Don't live in the past. Don't overthink things. Don't be afraid of change and things like that. But focus on the positives. Be grateful. Don't be so hard on yourself. Seize the day, really. I love that phrase, carpe diem, seize the day. And, life is a gift. We don't know at all how long we have. For some of us, it might be sooner than we think, and we don't want to have any regrets at the end of our life. I hope I'm encouraging someone, and I know you encourage a lot of people by your podcast. But remember, everyone, your positive thoughts lead to positive outcomes, and your deeds, whether they're good or bad, they follow you. And I always tell my nursing students, have a caring heart, a teachable spirit, and that will lead to a amazing nurse and an amazing career.
And there you have it, folks. That's the conclusion of segment 2 on the HR Kyle podcast. A special thank you to Brian for joining us yet again for this episode. I was really looking forward to hearing his perspective and I think there was a great deal of wisdom passed along there to our audience. So, Brian, thank you for joining us yet again.
My pleasure as always, Kyle. I look forward to these podcasts. I don't miss them. And I want to congratulate you on everything you've done, the great podcast. I know it's helping a lot of people. And I want to give a shout out to my students at The Ohio State University. Stay true to yourself. And I'll see you again down the road, Kyle. Thank you very much.
Wonderful, Brian. Thank you. Thank you very much. And students, thank you for tuning in. Certainly appreciate that. In fact, I want to thank everyone out there who's listening tonight. You're the reason why we do this, and your support means the world to me. So be sure that you're connecting with us and following the show. And until next time, stay motivated, stay inspired, and stay tuned. This is the HR Kyle podcast signing off. Take care.
Well, that's a wrap for today's episode of the HR Kyle podcast. We hope you found our discussion valuable and filled with insights that you can apply in your professional journey. Whether you're a business leader aiming to foster a thriving workplace or a job seeker looking to carve out your own path, remember that HR Kyle is the compass that can guide you towards success. If you enjoyed this episode, don't forget to subscribe, rate, and share it with your network. We're committed to being your trusted source for HR wisdom, and we look forward to having you back with us for our next episode. Remember, in the world of HR and professional growth, there's always room for progress. Be sure to visit our website at hrkyle.com. That's hrkyle.com. to learn more about how we can help you meet your business and professional goals. So until next time, this is HR Kyle signing off. Stay motivated, stay informed, and keep reaching for those career goals. Music provided by bensound.com. That's bensound.com.